The birthday cake sat on my kitchen counter, a single unlit candle in its center. The silence in my condo was a physical presence, heavy and suffocating. It was my 65th birthday, and my children, the two people I loved more than life itself, had not called. The next morning, I logged into my bank account, navigated to the scheduled payments, and found the massive monthly mortgage payment for their beautiful house in Silver Lake. With a single, deliberate click, I canceled it. They forgot my birthday. So I forgot to pay for their life. This is the story of a mother who was treated as an afterthought and decided to send a reminder that was too big to ignore. If you believe that gratitude is not optional, subscribe now and hit the notification bell, because you are about to see the most expensive late fee in history. Part 1. My day had started with hope, a silly maternal optimism that refused to be extinguished. I woke up and saw the sunshine streaming into my tidy condo in Irvine, a place I'd moved to after my husband, Robert, passed, to be closer to the kids. I had bought a small, ridiculously expensive cake from their favorite bakery. I had my phone on the table beside me all day, anticipating the call. At noon, I sent them both a message in our family group chat, a cheerful picture of my cake with the caption, "Celebrating 65 years today. Love you both." I watched the little read receipts appear under the message almost instantly. Then, nothing. The hours crawled by. 4 o'clock, the time my son, Josh, usually called on his commute home from his real estate office in downtown LA. Silence. 7 o'clock, when my daughter Chloe, a brand strategist with a trendy West Hollywood office, would typically remember to check in. More silence. My hope began to curdle into a familiar, heavy ache of disappointment. I ate a slice of the cake alone, the sweetness tasting like ash in my mouth. At 10 o'clock, my phone finally buzzed. It was a text from Chloe. "OMG Mom, so sorry, totally spaced on the day. Josh and I are at this insane wellness retreat in Joshua Tree. There's like 0 cell service. It's been a maze. We'll celebrate when we're back in the real world." HBD. A wellness retreat. They hadn't forgotten. They had prioritized. My 65th birthday was less important than a weekend of yoga and sound baths in the desert. The casualness of the text, the trendy acronyms, the complete lack of a genuine apology, it was the final, crushing weight on a scale that had been tipping for years. The grief for my husband was a constant, dull ache. But this was a fresh, sharp wound. A wound of irrelevance. I went to bed that night feeling not just forgotten, but erased. The next morning, I woke up, and the grief had been replaced by a cold, clear, and utterly calm resolve. For 5 years, ever since Robert died, I had been making the mortgage payments on their stunning architect-designed house in Silver Lake. It was a gift, my way of ensuring they had the security Robert and I had worked so hard to build. But gifts, I now realized, require gratitude. An obligation requires, at the very least, a phone call. I opened my laptop, the quiet clicks of the keyboard the only sound in the condo. I found the automatic payment. I canceled it. The confirmation message flashed on the screen. It was done. Will this quiet act of forgetfulness lead to a shocking karmic reckoning? This story of a mother's silent rebellion is just getting started. If you're hooked by this story of karma, subscribe now so you don't miss the next chapter. Part 2. Robert and I were children of a different California. We built our success the old-fashioned way, through decades of hard work in the decidedly unglamorous world of commercial logistics. We lived a comfortable, but not extravagant, life in a modest home in Fullerton. We saved, we invested, and we dreamed of giving our children the one thing we never had, a head start, a way to bypass the struggle. The house in Silver Lake was the culmination of that dream. We bought it for them as a wedding gift when Josh married his college sweetheart. It was a spectacular property, the kind of place young couples in Los Angeles spend their entire lives dreaming of. Our plan was simple. We would pay the mortgage for the first 10 years, giving them a decade to build their careers and save, at which point they would take over the payments themselves. It was a generous gift, but it was meant to be a foundation, not a permanent subsidy. After Robert died, my world shrank. Josh and Chloe, wrapped up in their own busy, important lives, encouraged me to sell our family home and move into the safer, more manageable condo in Irvine. I see now it wasn't about my safety, it was about liquidating another asset and making their inheritance more accessible. In my fog of grief, I agreed. The 10-year mark for the mortgage came and went, and no mention was ever made of them taking over the payments. I just kept paying. It was easier than confronting them, easier than admitting that my children had come to see my generosity not as a gift, but as an entitlement. Josh, my son, is 35. He sells high-end real estate to tech bros and foreign investors. He has the vocabulary of success. He talks about leverage, scaling, and disruption, but he has a deep, mortal fear of actual financial risk. The house, with its paid-for mortgage, is the entire foundation of his perceived affluence. It allows him to drive a leased Porsche and maintain a country club membership he couldn't otherwise afford. My daughter, Chloe, is 32. She runs a small, struggling PR firm for lifestyle brands. Her life is a carefully curated Instagram feed of gallery openings, rooftop cocktails, and designer clothes. She is deeply in debt, a fact she hides from everyone, including her brother. The house is her stage, the backdrop for the illusion of effortless success she sells to the world. They are both perfect products of modern LA culture, obsessed with image, terrified of authenticity, and completely dependent on a financial reality they have not earned. What is this forgotten payment hiding that could change everything? Part 3. For 3 weeks, there was silence. Josh and Chloe returned from their amaze retreat and went back to their busy lives, not bothering to call and celebrate as they had promised. My quiet act of rebellion went completely unnoticed, a testament to how little they thought about the mechanics of their own lives. The conflict began not with a bang, but with a polite, automated email from the bank, addressed to Josh. Subject: Your mortgage payment is past due. Josh's call came an hour later. There was no, "Hi Mom, how are you?" It was straight to the point, his voice tight with an annoyance he was barely trying to conceal. "Hey Mom. So, weird thing. We got an email from the bank saying the mortgage payment is late. You didn't get some kind of fraud alert or something, did you? You should probably call them and clear it up." He wasn't asking if I was okay. He was assigning me a task. He automatically assumed the error was mine, a glitch in the system that I needed to fix. This was the first test of my resolve. The old me would have apologized profusely, gotten on the phone with the bank immediately, and wired the money with extra for the late fee. The new me took a slow, deliberate breath. "Oh, that is strange, honey," I said, my voice a perfect imitation of a slightly confused, elderly mother. "I've been so scatterbrained lately. My birthday, turning 65, it really makes you think. Or, I guess, makes you not think. I completely forgot about it. I'm so sorry." The obstacle was my performance. I was a sweet, slightly dotty old woman, not a calculating strategist. "Okay, well," he said, the impatience clear in his voice. "Can you just handle it today? The late fees are insane." "I'll do my best, dear," I said, and then added, with a touch of inspired cruelty, "my memory just isn't what it used to be." I hung up. I did not call the bank. I did not handle it. I went back to tending my roses. Will a secret from the past turn the tables? Part 4. A week later, the polite email was replaced by a formal letter, printed on intimidating bank letterhead. Notice of intent to report to credit bureaus. This was the ticking clock. A missed payment was an inconvenience. A 30-day delinquency reported to Experian and TransUnion? That was a catastrophe. For Josh, whose entire real estate career was built on a foundation of good credit, and for Chloe, who financed her entire life on a mountain of credit cards, a hit to their credit scores would be a financial apocalypse. The subplot of their own financial instability now came into sharp focus. They couldn't just pay the mortgage themselves. I knew this because Robert and I had designed it that way. The monthly payment was a staggering sum, a figure that required a level of income and discipline they simply did not possess. Their frantic, whispered phone calls, which I could only imagine, were now not about a forgetful mother, but about a very real, very immediate financial crisis. My sister, Karen, who lived in Arizona and was the only person I had told, became my co-conspirator and moral support. "You know they're going to lose their minds when they figure it out," she had said, a delighted chuckle in her voice. "They've never had to face a real consequence in their lives." Her validation was crucial. It quieted the small, nagging voice of maternal guilt that still whispered in my ear late at night. The complexity of my plan was in its passivity. I wasn't doing anything. I was simply not doing something, and my inaction was causing their carefully constructed world to crumble. The pressure was entirely on them. They were in a cage of their own making, and they were beginning to rattle the bars. Part 5. The rattling bars arrived at my front door on a sunny Saturday afternoon. They didn't call first. They just appeared, their faces a thundercloud of shared panic and righteous indignation. Josh was waving the formal letter from the bank. Chloe was pacing on my pristine beige carpet, her hands flying as she talked. "Mom, this has gone on long enough." Josh started, his voice a half-beat shy of a yell. "We're about to have a 30-day late on our credit report. This will ruin us. Why haven't you fixed this?" "I told you, honey, I forgot," I said, my voice soft. "I offered them iced tea. They ignored it." "Forgot?" Chloe shrieked, her voice cracking. "You forgot? For a whole month?" I had to cancel my Amex Platinum card because I was maxed out and they wouldn't raise my limit with this hanging over our heads. Do you have any idea how humiliating that is? The sheer, unadulterated selfishness of her complaint was breathtaking. She was not worried about our family or my health. She was worried about her credit card. That was it. That was the moment my resolve hardened from steel into diamond. The turning point was here. I let them vent for another few minutes, their accusations of my senility and incompetence washing over me. When they finally wound down, panting with a mixture of rage and fear, I stood up. I walked over to the calendar hanging in my kitchen. I pointed to the date, 3 weeks earlier, that I had circled in red pen, with a small, sad-looking drawing of a birthday cake next to it. "What's this, Mom?" Josh asked, his voice still harsh. "That," I said, my voice no longer soft or confused, but quiet, cold, and clear as glass, "was my 65th birthday. The one you were too busy to call me on." I turned to face them, my expression unreadable. And that was the day my memory started to get really, really bad. "I didn't forget to pay the mortgage, Josh. You forgot me. And I'm starting to think that's far more expensive. How will this shocking secret change their lives forever? This incredible twist has you hooked? Subscribe now for more stories of delicious karma." Part 6. The revelation landed in the quiet condo with the force of a physical blow. The color drained from their faces. They stared at me, then at the calendar, then back at me. The arrogant anger was gone, replaced by a slack-jawed, horrified silence. They were not dealing with their dotty, forgetful mother. They were dealing with a stranger, a woman of terrifying, quiet intention. The immediate consequence was the complete shattering of their reality. Their entire worldview, which was predicated on my unconditional passive support, had been a lie. They had mistaken my love for weakness, my generosity for an obligation. The immediate repercussion was that the mortgage was still unpaid. The deadline to avoid the credit report hit was now just days away. My revelation had not solved their problem, it had only explained its source. You did this on purpose?" Chloe whispered, her voice a mixture of awe and terror. "I canceled a payment," I said calmly. "Your disrespect for me, for your father's memory, for the gift you were given, that is what's causing this. My actions are just the consequence." Their reaction was not, as I had perhaps foolishly hoped, an immediate, heartfelt apology. It was a panicked, desperate scramble. Okay, you've made your point, Josh said, his voice pleading now. We're sorry. We're horrible, terrible children. We get it. Can you please just call the bank and pay it now? They still didn't understand. They thought this was a transaction, a punishment that could be ended by saying the magic words. They still thought they could manage me. Will they overcome this new challenge? Part 7. No, I said. The single word hung in the air, absolute and non-negotiable. I will not be calling the bank. My growth in this chapter was in my ability to say that word and mean it. For my entire life as a mother, my children's problems were my problems. Overcoming that instinct, the deep cellular urge to fix things for them, was the hardest thing I had ever done. The challenge now was to hold the line, to force them to find their own solution, a muscle they had never been required to use. My transformation was from a provider to a teacher. A very strict, very firm teacher. This is your house, I told them, my voice devoid of anger. This is your responsibility. You are 35 and 32 years old. You will figure out how to pay your own bills. They stared at me, utterly lost. They didn't have the money. The late fees had ballooned the payment to a sum that was impossible for them to produce on short notice. They left my house that day not with a solution, but with a life-altering problem. In the days that followed, I heard through my sister, Karen, about the frantic, humiliating scramble. Josh had to go to his boss and ask for an advance on his commission, admitting his financial distress. Chloe had to sell a trove of her designer handbags to a luxury consignment shop in Beverly Hills, an act that was, for her, a fate worse than death. They had to borrow money from friends. They were forced to expose the fragile, fraudulent nature of their financial lives to the very people they were trying to impress. They were overcoming their own pride, their own arrogance, not because they wanted to, but because I was forcing them to. They were, for the first time, experiencing the consequences of their own choices. But what awaits them in the next confrontation? Part 8. They managed to scrape the money together. They made the payment just one day before the 30-day delinquency was reported. They had saved their credit, but the crisis had exposed the truth of their situation. Their beautiful life was a house of cards, and I was the one holding the table. A week later, they called me. The tone was different this time. It was subdued, beaten. "Mom," Josh said, "can we talk?" They came to my condo, and for the first time, they came with an offering, a small, beautiful orchid and a card. Inside, in their own handwriting, was an apology. A real one. They apologized for my birthday, for the years of taking me for granted, for their selfishness. It was the conversation I had been waiting years to have. But I knew this was not the end. An apology was words. The climax of this story needed to be about actions. I had been preparing for this. I had spent the last week with my estate lawyer. I was not going to simply resume the payments. The old arrangement was dead. I was preparing to offer a new one, a final deal that would fundamentally and permanently restructure our relationship. The tension was no longer about a missed payment. It was about the entire future of their lives, and of our family. The final confrontation will reveal everything, won't it? Part 9. After they had finished their apology, after I had accepted it with a quiet, solemn nod, I laid out the new reality. "I'm glad you've had time to think," I began, my voice calm and businesslike. "Because I have too. The old arrangement, where I simply pay for your life with no expectation of anything in return, is over. It wasn't good for you, and it wasn't good for me." I slid a document across the coffee table. It was a formal agreement my lawyer had drafted. "This is the new deal," I said. "You have two options. Option 1, I will sell the house. You will get the equity from the sale, which will be a substantial sum. Enough for you to each get a down payment on a more modest home that you can actually afford, and a fresh start. You will be completely independent. Our financial relationship will be over." They looked at each other, horrified. Selling the house, their status symbol, their stage, was unthinkable. "What's option 2? Josh asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Option 2, I said, is you keep the house. Under a new set of terms." I pointed to the document. "I will continue to pay the property taxes and the insurance as a gift. However, you, together, will now be responsible for paying the monthly mortgage. Directly to me. I have had the title of the house transferred into a family trust, of which I am the sole trustee. You will essentially be my tenants. If you miss a payment, the trust will initiate formal eviction proceedings. Furthermore," I continued, "I expect a phone call every Sunday. And you will both be here at my house, for my birthday and for Thanksgiving. Not because you have to, but because you are part of a family. Those are the terms." The climax was their choice. It was a choice between a clean break with a cash payout, or continuing to live their beautiful life under my absolute and total control. It was a choice between freedom and the gilded cage they had grown so accustomed to. After a long, silent, and agonizing moment, Josh looked at Chloe, and then at me. "We'll take option 2, he said. The vengeance was complete. I had not taken their house. I had taken their entitlement. The new arrangement was a shock to their systems. For the first time, they had a real, non-negotiable bill to pay every month. The lavish dinners, the weekend trips to Palm Springs, the constant stream of new clothes, all of it came to a screeching halt. Chloe had to get a second job, doing freelance PR work on the weekends. Josh had to start taking on smaller, less glamorous real estate clients to ensure he had a steady income stream. They were forced to live in the real world, and it was a difficult, humbling adjustment. But a funny thing happened. Without the pressure of maintaining a fraudulent lifestyle, they started to become more genuine. Their conversations with me on Sundays were stilted at first, but they slowly became more natural. They started asking about my life, about my friends, about my garden. They started to see me not as a resource, but as a person. The house was no longer just a backdrop for their social media. It was a home they were actively working to keep. The emotional resolution was not in their punishment, but in their slow, painful, and ultimately necessary transformation. On my 66th birthday, a year later, they showed up at my condo. They didn't have a lavish gift. They had a grocery bag. They cooked me dinner. We sat on my small patio, eating the slightly burnt pasta they had made, and we talked. We laughed. For the first time in a very long time, we were a family. The mortgage payment had been a terrible lesson, but it had bought me something priceless: my children. Do you think karma ends here? Family, love, and money can be a complicated mix. This story is a powerful reminder that relationships require effort from all sides, and that true generosity should never be taken for granted. It's about setting boundaries and teaching the people you love how to value you. What is the line between helping and enabling? Share your thoughts on this difficult question in the comments below. If this story about a mother's tough love resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more emotional tales of karma.